discuss, when they discussed Innocent III's decretal, they began to discuss the rights of non-Christians. And one of the most important jurists who then discussed these rights was a jurist who lived shortly after and wrote shortly after Pope Innocent IV, named Hostiensis, or his correct name is Henricus de Sugucio. He was Cardinal Hostiensis, that's where he gets the name Hostiensis. Now, in the medieval period from the 13th century, Innocent IV and Hostiensis are the two most famous jurists of canon law, and they're the only jurists in the 13th century who dealt with this issue of the rights of non-Christian people, and their opinions became the major opinions that dominate the jus commune during the entire medieval period. Now, all of you know these two names. We've already met Bartolomé de las Casas and Franciscus de Vitoria. You all know. After the conquest, and this I suppose is the main point, and I don't really have to belabor it, but after the conquest, this issue of the rights of native people became a very, very crucial discussion, both in popular literature as well as in the courts. And I suspect you all know that story, don't you? You all know that in 16th century Spanish Empire, that there were court cases as well as in the, not just with Vitoria and Las Casas, but with Suarez and a whole group of jurists and theologians who debated the issue of what were the rights of native people. And I've given you an outline here. I've given you an outline on the top, beginning with Innocent IV, of the jurists who advocated for the idea that Native Americans had rights that could not be taken away. And on the bottom, and you'll notice the list is much shorter, on the bottom are two of the prominent 16th century thinkers of those who agreed with Hostiensis that Native American rights can be taken away. Pedro, do you know this book? I just discovered it, the Calafate Gutierrez book.
Yes, Pedro Calafate is professor at Faculdade de Letras, the Humanity Faculty, and maybe he's going to meet us, and he really wants to meet you.
Oh. Well, I hope I'll be able to meet him as well. This book, for those of you who are interested in this topic, this is a wonderful summary. It's a big, heavy what we in English call a coffee table book. It's big, it's thick, it has beautiful pictures, and in the English-speaking world, you put a book like this on the table to impress your friends. But it summarizes on these issues. What is very good about this book is it summarizes all the Iberian jurists' opinions about these issues from roughly 1500 until 1600. Unfortunately, it ends in 1600. And my next argument that I would make to you today is that the jurists after 1600 are really, really interesting and important. I'm on. Whoop, I went too far. And a jurist that I would like to call your attention to today is Diego de Avendano. All right. Have you ever heard of Diego de Avendano? Who has heard of Diego de Avendano? Nobody, I'll bet. I had never heard of Diego de Avendano, and for very good reason. He's practically unknown. How many of you are writing either a thesis or a dissertation? Nobody? How many of you want to write a thesis, a law thesis, or a PhD dissertation?
Yeah, really shy.
Yes? You would like to? Say it louder. This would be a great topic. It's a wonderful topic. There are other jurists. Well, in the case of Diego, I'm not sure whether he's primarily a jurist or he's a theologian. And one of the reasons that we're not sure, or I'm not sure, and I don't think anyone is sure, one of the reasons we're not sure is because, and I'm not going to repeat what I have up on the screen. I want you to read what is on the screen. But he was born in Spain, in Segovia, and then we have no idea where he was educated. We have no idea when he went to South America. We have no idea when he became a Jesuit, which I suppose isn't a bad thing. Right? And we have no idea when he began to teach. And this is when I just discovered Diego about 2 years ago. I'd never heard of him before. I'd never read about him before. And when I discovered him and tried to find as much information about him as I could, I discovered that he was teaching at the Pontifical University, the Colegio Massimo, si dice San Pablo di Lima, Massimo si dice, yeah, like that, in Peru. Now the first thing that, it's an expression that I like to use in English, the first thing that knocked my socks off, Francisco, what does knock my socks off mean?
I wouldn't know. I suppose.
Does anyone know what knock my socks off means? Surprises me. If you get your socks knocked off, particularly if they're long socks, it means that you're really, really surprised. The first thing that really surprised me, I have up on the screen. Now think about this. He's teaching in Lima, Peru, sometime in the 1650s, 1660s, 1670s. What is your name?
My name?
Anna?
Anna.
Anna. Were you in my talk yesterday?
Yes.
In the front row?
Yes.
Yes. And you did a lot of smiling, as you're doing today. Anna, just because you're in the back row does not mean I can't find you. Anna, tell me, why was I surprised by what you're looking at on the screen? Well, I hope so, unless you can speak Italian or German or French.
Did you refer to Africans trying to escape? Spanish atrocities. So he's writing in Peru?
He's writing these books in Peru. Right, first point. Think about that. He's writing these books in Peru.
About atrocities committed by Spanish against Africans?
Well, and he's writing about, as we'll see, I'm not going to go into this in boring detail, but he's writing primarily about the judicial legal rights of Native Americans. Where are those books published?
It's just that I can't remember. Antwerp and Frankfurt?
Antwerp
Frankfurt.
and Lyon. How did he do that? The first question that he's in Lima, Peru, in the 17th century, and he's publishing, these are massive volumes, by the way. You can download a number of them, particularly the two most important for what I'm talking about are the two that I've highlighted in blue. You can download them from Google Books or from the Staatsbibliothek in München. You can also get copies, digital copies of these books. But he's in Lima, Peru. He's writing these massive volumes. These are not small volumes, they're large folio volumes. And he is publishing them in Europe. That was my first question. How did he do this? How was it done? And as we're going to see, not in a lot of detail, but as we're going to see, he became well known in Europe as well. So here we have a jurist working in the New World in the 17th century. He's publishing these massive books on the rights of Native Americans in South America. And he's living in Peru. That's the first point. Now, I think what I have on the screen, by the way, you can go to my website, and all of these pages that I'm showing you are on my website. So if you're interested, are you interested yet?
Yeah. No, if I were you said I wouldn't come. Yeah.
But if you go to my web pages, you'll be able to look at these, so you don't have to copy down anything. They're on the internet. But this is everything that I could find that was written about Diego de Avendano. And what I'd point out to you, it's not much. So if you were doing a thesis or a PhD dissertation, I would just suggest to you that Diego de Avendano would be an excellent topic if you're interested in legal history. Now, what did he talk about? The primary subjects that Diego talked about was, and this surprised me too, he spent a lot of time talking about whether the Pope, Sixtus IV, Sisto IV, and what did Sisto IV do? Oh, you know it. Yes, you do. What did he do? Excuse me. I misspoke. Alexander VI. Alessandro VI. I got my popes wrong. What did he do? Yes, and he divided up the world between the Portuguese and the Spanish because he was Spanish. And so you got Brazil and the Spaniards got the rest of the world. In any case, Diego, now remember this is the 17th century, he spent a lot of time, and this was, as I said, a surprise to me, he spent a lot of time going over the argument of whether the Bishop of Rome had the authority and the power to make that division of the world. It surprised me because I thought that that issue was settled, but it wasn't settled from the point of view of Diego de Avendano. And then, not a surprise, he was also, like Bartolomé de las Casas, like Francisco Suarez, like Francisco Vitoria, he was also concerned with the rights of the natives. But what also surprised me, and maybe it was just my ignorance, because I hadn't read enough of these New World, what I think of as New World jurists, he was also very interested and wrote a lot about the rights of African slaves who had been transported to South America to work for the Spanish and the Portuguese. I want to look more carefully. This is the most interesting engraving that I've found. And remember, this is the European view of what's going on in the New World. I want to draw your attention to this. And can you see it? And to this. What is it?
Torture.
It's torture. What kind of torture, do you know? It's examples of two of the most common modes of judicial torture that were used in the courts in the 16th and 17th centuries. Although by the 17th century, many courts had rejected these types of interrogation. Although, as you probably know, in the United States of America, we have rediscovered torture recently, to our disgrace and shame. But tell me what you know about these modes of torture. What is your name?
George.
George. That's easy. Grazie. This is a mode of torture which you notice this weight that's hanging down from the body. And then this figure, a judicial figure, is pulling the defendant on a pulley. Yes, and it's called, in Italian, it's called la corda. That's the name of the torture. I don't know whether there's a... because of the pulley. Uh-huh. Do you have any idea? What is your name?
Margarida.
Melinda.
No. Margarida.
Margaret.
Oh. I'm displaying my ignorance of the pronunciation of the Portuguese language. So I'll call you Margarita, okay? And what do you know about that?
Not much. I know it called poulet, and obviously the words is painful for the but I don't know very much about it.
Does anyone know when the Portuguese outlawed torture in their courts? I don't know the answer to that question.
You know, according to Portuguese jurisprudence, you had to have permission by a higher court in order to get prisoner tortured. So it's not up to each